Good morning, everyone. We are Team Astronomy, or as we named ourselves, Team Exomites. Let us now introduce ourselves. We are a group of 12 high school students keen on learning about the mysteries of the universe. We were helped by our two incredible mentors, Anjali ma'am and Swastik sir. With their guidance, we challenged ourselves to find exoplanets that would lie in the habitable zone. Now, we will be taking you forward our progression in the project, starting with a few initial topics we were introduced to.
So the first topic that we want to introduce you to is the radial velocity method of detection of planets. This method is also called the wobble method because it attempts to detect the wobble of a star which has an exoplanet surrounding it. Why this happens because when a planet goes around when a planet goes around a star, it causes the star to move away from its center due to the gravitational pull, and the star appears to wobble, as you can see in the GIF over here. It is not actually wobbling, it is just going around its barycenter, which is the center of mass of the entire system. We can detect this using the Doppler shift of light, which is basically the change in the wavelength of the light as the source of the light moves away or towards us. When the source of the light moves away from us, the wavelength of the light expands and it causes to appear redder. And when the source of the light comes towards us, the wavelength of the light contracts and appears bluish to us. We call this the redshift and blue shift. If we observe a periodic redshift and blue shift in the light coming from the star, we can infer that there is a wobble happening, that the star is wobbling a little bit. And if there is a wobble, we can tell that there is a planet orbiting the star, because generally the planet would cause the wobble. However, there are a few limitations to this method. The first is that at times, we can't tell whether the wobble is caused by one object around the star or multiple objects, because the amount of wobble caused by one planet could be similar to the amount of wobble caused by two or more planets due to their masses and gravitational effects. The other limitations that we can think of was that at times the wobble of the star is so little that it is very difficult for us to detect, because it's not visible with the naked eye, and we need very, very precise instruments that at times cannot record such a minute wobble. So this is not the primary method that we use to detect exoplanets.
Hello everyone, I'll be talking about the second method that we studied, that is called the transit. The transit method consists of regularly measuring the luminosity of a star in order to detect the periodic decreasing luminosity associated with the transit of an exoplanet. So this method is mainly based on vision that aims to indirectly detect the presence of one or more exoplanets. It is when a planet orbiting around its star comes in front of it from our point of view. Since the planet is overshadowed by the star, it appears black. We can see it in the GIF over here. This is a simulation of the Venus transit. We see that the Venus planet is black in color because of the overshadow. It is a very famous method, and almost 90% of the exoplanets were discovered through this method. It is also more of a luck method because of its many limitations. Some of these limitations are conditions. Suppose we need the alignment of the planet and the star, and also the orbital position of the star. The planet. If the planet is revolving above the star, then we would not be able to see the transit of the planet. Yes.
Nuclear fission and fusion. Nuclear fission is a process in which an unstable nucleus splits into two nuclides and emit neutrons. There are two types of nuclear fission: spontaneous fission and induced fission. Nuclear fusion is opposite of nuclear fission. It is a process where two lighter nuclides combining together, releasing vast amount of energy. Fusion reaction occurs in the star where two hydrogen nuclei fuse together under a high temperature and pressure to form nucleus of helium atom.
Apparent and accurate magnitude. So what exactly is it? So many years ago, the astronomers looked up at the sky. They gave a magnitude to the brightest star in the sky as 1, and the stars painted in that as 2, 3, 4, and so on till 6. But when the telescope was discovered, They saw even more stars, which are not even visible to the naked eye, and they gave them 7 and above. So this is apparent magnetism. In very, very simple terms, it is the brightness of the star when viewed from Earth. And what is absolute magnetism? If we keep that same star away at a distance of 10 parsecs, 1 parsec is 3.2 light years. Then we look at the star. That is the brightness of the star, and that is absolute magnetism. Then why 10 parsecs? Suppose if we stand near a bonfire, if we are too close to it, then it's burning hot, and if we are too far away from it, then we don't feel the warmth of the bonfire. So 10 parsec is a distance like that. It is not too far away or not too close. Did you know comma hot is a star in which the apparent magnitude is lower than the absolute magnitude? Keep in mind that the brightness of the star, when it's lower, it is the brighter. Thank you.
So, we were talking about exoplanets and we named ourselves as exominds. So, what basically is exoplanet? Exoplanet is basically the planet which is not in our solar system and belongs to a foreign star. Now, let's talk about the most interesting part of our problem. That is our whole GSS program. That is our problem statement. So, what is exactly our problem statement? Using the data from the NASA's exoplanet archive, we have to find out the habitable zone of the star, the foreign star, and find whether the corresponding planet of the star is in the habitable zone or not. And then we need to plot the graph of the effective stellar temperature versus the average habitable zone. So let's see what happens next.
So before we dive right into how we solved a problem statement, here's the step-by-step process which will give you a brief picture. So first step was collecting the data. The second step was finding the relations for the calculations. Then we had to generate and then we had to develop and execute the codes for the calculation. Next, we had to generate and plot the graph. And the last step was analyzing the graph and coming to a conclusion, hence solving a problem statement.
The data from the NASA exoplanet archives after importing to the Excel was imported in Python, where data cleaning was performed. The formulas were now going to be coded in Python. We went through many formulas, but we used the one which gave us the most suitable results. For luminosity, we used the equation of luminosity of a black body. A black body is a physical body that absorbs or emits all frequencies of electromagnetic radiation. Here, luminosity is found when sigma is multiplied by the temperature to the power 4, whose result is multiplied by the result of 4 into pi multiplied by the square of the radius of the star. In this equation, sigma is the Stephen-Boltzmann's constant. So now we have the luminosity, and from luminosity we are able to find the habitable zone. So for in a habitable zone, we calculated it by multiplying the root of the luminosity found by 0.8, which was then added to the radius of the star, giving us an inner habitable zone. For the outer habitable zone, we did the same, except the root of luminosity was multiplied by 1.2, and then the result of what was added to the radius of star, giving us the outer habitable zone.
Now, let's talk about coding the formula for the calculation. And this was again the most important part of our whole presentation, because without coding we cannot find the result. So what did we use and why did we use it? So we used Python as a primary language because again it is really good for data analysis. And we used few libraries. Those were Pandas, NumPy, Matplotlib and Seaborn. And how did we use them? So I'll tell you now. First of all, we started off and then we used Pandas in order to import the data and do the data cleaning. And what did we import? Specifically, we included planet mass, stellar radius, stellar temperature, and many other columns. And after that, we created a function for luminosity, inner habitable zone, and outer habitable zone. And then we found the average of it. After that, for plotting the graph, we used Matplotlib and NumPy for the calculation. And for plotting the graph and fitting the best curve, we used Seaborn. We'll show you the graph in the next slide. So this was our graph, and again, this is the most important part of our whole presentation. Now we use Python for the accuracy, and we can observe many good things here. The very important thing that we observe here is that the log of effective stellar temperature and the log of habitable zone is plotted here. So we can see that when the average habitable zone is moving away from the star, the effective temperature is rising up. Why does this happen? And why did we use this thing? Again, how did we define habitable zone is how the graph is. So we define habitable zone in a way that the liquid water can sustain there, and the range of temperature in which the liquid water sustain in specific pressure and temperature is 0 degree to 100 degree centigrade. And this is why when the temperature is increasing, the liquid water might not sustain, and it might get vaporized. And when the temperature is decreasing, the liquid water might get solidified. So this is why the temperature is very important factor. Now let's talk about the conclusion. What is the conclusion and how did we find it? So conclusion: none of the exoplanets lie in the habitable zone. This is because of few errors that we had. Our data was not good enough. Second, so we have to do the data cleaning, and in that many exoplanets were shut off, and that is why we could not find any exoplanet in our data, as our data were reduced to around 4,000 to 614. After that, the effective temperature increases, the distance of the habitable zone from the star is also increases, and hence what we find, effective temperature is directly proportional to the distance.
That's right. So we team Exominds, we wanted to aware people about space and about our project. So we also made a website. It is not yet published, but it will be soon, and you can check it out.
We also made social media accounts to share our research among the world so that everyone can follow along our progression.
Guest speaker. Team Exominds was very fortunate to get to interact with Sir Jayant Murthy, who is a renowned astronomer and physicist around the globe. We would like to thank him for guiding us, as learning from the best in this field helped us to go about our problem statement when we were overwhelmed by the complexity of it.
Finally, we would like to thank some very important people who have been crucial to this journey. We want to thank SSCRD itself for this great opportunity in the form of GS. We also want to thank our supervisors, Ma'am Anjali and Sir Swastik, who have been extremely helpful to us in solving our doubts and explaining every detail. And lastly, we are grateful to all our cohort members for making this an enjoyable and amazing experience.
So now we are at the end of our presentation. So before going, we'd like to end it with a quote. That is, we are an impossibility in an impossible universe. And that is why we are looking for another impossibility in another exoplanet. Thank you so much. And now we are open to questions.
Yes, I'd like to answer that. The number of planets that are discovered using the transit method are 3,343.
Okay, I would like to answer this question. So the significance of habitable zone. This is a very good question because again, as we know what is a habitable zone, and we should know how we define it first of all. So how Team Exominds define habitable zone for this project is that the liquid water is sustained there, and when liquid water can sustain there, there is a possibility of life because the most important factor for living is water, and that is why there is a lot of significance for the habitable zone. Yes. So yes, this question is again important. Is there any outliner in your graph? Yes, we had two graphs basically. The first graph had an outliner. Why? Because we used the formula which we used was an approximation. In that case, what happened was there was a big giant, and there the habitable zone, the temperature was really high, around 27,000 degree Kelvin, and the habitable zone lied near the star, and that was the outlier for our graph. So we would surely look after this thing. We were looking for the liquid water in the first case. Now our second step would be to look for the gravity and many atmospheric things. So we'll surely look after this, sir. Thank you so much for your suggestion.
Habitable zone is for humans, I suppose. How about possibility of evolution of life independently, non-humans? So would the team like to take up that question?
Yes, we would love to take that question. And how about the possibility of evolution of life independently? So yes, here the question is really good. And again, the habitable zone is for human. Yes, no. There is habitable zone is basically how we define it again for the liquid water sustainability. So liquid water is important for all other beings present in the whole evolution. So liquid water is where the life starts. Again, before when the earth was really hot, then the ozone layer formed, and then the liquid water. The liquid water was the backbone for the life. So that is why independently there is a possibility of evolution. So yes, there are many other possibilities as well, that without liquid water there can be life such as bacteria which are present in the space, in the vacuum. So yes, there are many other possibilities too, sir. Yes, sir. Few organisms can take the water from the air, moisture, but again, how we define it, the liquid water in the habitable zone is important for us. As a humans, we are looking for more other species, and that is why liquid water is the most sustainable thing we look after.
So the biggest drawback of radial velocity is that there are many limitations. Like I mentioned, there is the limitation of not being able to tell how many planets are there. It's difficult for us to tell what the mass of the planet is because of the gravitational effect as well, and also that at times we can't detect the wobble. However, the biggest limitation of transit would be that it depends a lot on chance and on a lot on aligning of all, like the planet, the exoplanet Earth, and the star that the exoplanet is from. We need there to be a near perfect eclipse for us to be able to detect the light curve. So that, while it's not a very even though we have hypothesized that there could be at least one planet per star, the transit method won't be able to help us in detecting all of the planets, because the aligning of the planets from between Earth and the star could be different. So these are the two main drawbacks of both the detection methods that we mentioned.
The same goes for the radial velocity method. Imagine if the orbital, all the orbits are flat to us, we cannot determine the wobble also, because wobble you can determine only if the star is going back or forth. Yeah, but if it is in the flat projection to us, we cannot determine it either. So this is the biggest drawback of this. Yeah. So why I ask you this is that you know how many planets were detected by both methods, approximately 4,600, and there are some 5,000 candidates and so on. Just imagine if so many planets detected by just this chance alignment, how many planets would be there by projection in our galaxy?
Probably billions, the same amount as the stars at least.
Exactly.
Per star, so.
Exactly. Thank you.
It's amazing, because I never expected that these kids would go to that extent, because I can only compliment the thing and all the best to the kids. I never expected, probably Python and all these things, maybe at BTech level or beyond. When these kids get exposed to such kind of environment, both knowledge-wise and information-wise, I can only compliment. I don't have any words to say so. But all the best, kids. You keep doing this kind of research, maybe beyond. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Shashidhar sir, do we have any comments, inputs from you for the team?
Oh, excellent. I'm wonderstruck. The level of thinking, thought process, presentation skills, amazing. I suggest you also broaden your thinking out of the sphere of humans, go for life as a holistic approach. Thank you.